My name is Norley Castro, and this is my educational philosophers presentation. First, I'll start by doing the overview of each philosopher. So first we have Joanne Amos Comenius, lived 1592 to 1670. Historical context: he was alive during the 17th century, during the religious war following Protestant Reformation. Purpose of education: relate instruction to children's natural growth and development, contribute to peace and social justice. And curriculum was vernacular language, reading, writing, mathematics, religion, history, Latin, and universal knowledge. Methods of instruction was based on readiness and stages of human growth, gradual, cumulative, orderly use of objects. Role of the teacher: permissive facilitator of learning, collaborates instruction to child's stages of development. Significance: developed a more humane view of the child. Educational method incorporating sensation. Next we have Jean Jacques Rousseau, I think is how it's pronounced. And this is actually who I have, but I will get more into detail about him later. His historical context is during the 18th century French Enlightenment. Purpose of education was to create learning environments in which children's natural goodness can grow. Curriculum was nature or the environment. Methods of instruction: reliance on sensation, experience with nature. Role of the teacher: assists nature rather than imposing social conventions on the child. And significance: led a romantic revolt against the doctrine of child depravity, a forerunner of child-centered progressivism. Next we have Johann Henrik Pestalozzi. The historical context for him was during the early 19th century, post-Napoleonic period, and early industrialism. Purpose of education: develop the human being's moral, mental, and physical powers harmoniously, using sense perception and forming clear ideas. And curriculum was object lessons, form, number, sound, which is the name. Methods of instruction was reliance on sensation. Object lessons: simple to complex, near to far, concrete to abstract. Role of the teacher was to act as a caring facilitator of learning by creating a home-like school environment, skilled in using the special method. And his significance was to devise an educational method that introduced object teaching and sensory learning in elementary schools. Next we have Johann Friedrich Herbart. Historical context was mid-19th century, developments in European philosophy and psychology. Purpose of education was develop multiple interests and moral character. Curriculum was academic and humanistic studies, especially history and literature. Methods of instruction was systematic organization of instruction, preparation, presentation, association, generalization, and application. Role of the teacher was a well-prepared professional who follows the prescribed sequence in teaching. And significance was devised an education method that stressed sequential organization of instruction and moral character development. Friedrich Froebel. Historical context: 19th century resurgence of philosophical idealism and nationalism. Purpose of education: develop the latent spiritual essence of the child in prepared environment. Curriculum with songs, stories, games, gifts, and occupations. Methods of instruction was self-activity, play, imitation. Role of the teacher was to facilitate children's growth. And significance: created the kindergarten, a special early childhood learning environment. Next we have Herbert Spencer. Was during Darwin's theory of evolution in 1859 and rise of 19th century industrial corporations. Purpose of education was to provide competitive situations in which the most able are rewarded. Curriculum: practical, scientific, and applied subjects. Methods of instruction: reliance on sensation and the scientific method and activities. Role of the teacher was to organize instruction in basic activities. And significance: a leading curriculum theorist who stressed scientific and applied knowledge. Next we have John Dewey. Historical context was early 20th century American progressive movement, growth of science, and rise of pragmatic philosophy. Purpose of education was to contribute to the individual's personal, social, and intellectual growth. Curriculum was making and doing, history and geography, science and problems. Methods of instruction: problem solving according to the scientific method. Role of the teacher was to create a learning environment based on learners' shared experiences. Significance: develop the pragmatic, experimentalist philosophy of education. Now we have Jane Addams. Historical context: first half of 20th century, period of massive immigration and urban change. Purpose of education was to assimilate immigrants into American society while preserving their ethnic, cultural heritages. Curriculum was a wide range of practical skills for life in urban centers, along with arts and sciences and problem solving. Methods of instruction: begin with learners' neighborhood, culture, and needs, lead to broader social realities and connections. Role of the teacher was to engage in a reciprocal or mutual learning experience with students. Significance: developed a progressive theory of urban and multicultural education. Next we have Maria Montessori. Historical context was late 19th and early 20th century assertion of feminism, greater attention to early childhood education. Purpose of education was to assist children's sensory, physical, and intellectual development in a prepared environment. Curriculum was motor and sensory skills, pre-planned materials. Methods of instruction was spontaneous learning, activities, practical, sensory, and formal skills, exercises for practical life. Role of the teacher was to act as a director of learning by using a didactic materials in a prepared environment. Significance: developed a widely used method and philosophy of early childhood education. Next we have Jean Piaget. Historical context was 20th century developments in psychology by Freud, Hall, Jung, and others. Purpose of education was structure, instruction on children's patterns of growth and stages of development. And curriculum was concrete and formal operations. Methods of instruction was individualized programs, exploration and experimentation with concrete materials. Role of the teacher was to organize instruction according to the stages of cognitive development. And significance is formulated a theory of cognitive development. Last, we have Paulo Freire. Historical context was late 20th century critique of neo-colonialism and globalism. Purpose of education was to raise consciousness about exploitative conditions, and curriculum was literary circles and critical dialogues. Methods of instruction, use of personal and group autobiographies. Role of the teacher was to stimulate awareness of real conditions of life, and significance was formulated a theory and praxis of critical consciousness. So now I have the influence that each philosopher had on today's schools. I have Comenius, schools organized according to children's stages of development. Rousseau, I have permissive teaching based on child freedom. Pestalozzi, schooling based on emotional security and object learning. We have Herbart, teacher preparation based on prescribed method and entry of history and literature into curriculum as a moral core. Froebel, preschools designed to liberate the child's creativity. Spencer, schooling that stresses scientific knowledge and competitive values. Dewey, a schooling that emphasizes problem solving and activities in a context of community. Adams, respect for multicultural pluralism in a shared American cultural context. Montessori, early childhood schooling that is intellectually and developmentally stimulating. And then we have Piaget, schooling organized around cognitive developmental stages. And Freire, influence critical theory and liberation pedagogy. So I had Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He was a Swiss-born French theorist that lived during the 18th century Enlightenment. He advocated for children's rights in his books, but abandoned his own children to the orphanages instead of taking care of them and teaching them on his own. In 1762, he published a novel titled Emile, which is about a boy's education from infancy to adulthood. He also argued that children's instincts and needs are naturally good. Now, within his book Emile, he identified 5 developmental stages that Emile goes through. Within the book, the first stage is infancy, which is birth to age 5, where Emile learns directly by using his senses. We have childhood, which is age 5 to 12, where he creates his own personal identity and also learns about consequences to his actions, where if he does something good and it feels good, or if he hurts himself and he learns not to do that thing again. We have boyhood, age 12 to 15, learns natural science by observing how plants and animals grow, also learns geography by directly observing his surroundings rather than studying maps. There's adolescence, which is age 15 to 18, where he's ready to learn about the broader world of society, politics, art, and commerce. Visits some museums, art galleries. And the last stage is youth, age 18 to 20, where he visits Paris and Europe's major cities to broaden himself intellectually